This evening on Queer News Tonight, we have invited an interesting LGBTQ plus personality. We're in the LGBTQ community, so we know Broadway, entertainers, fashion, nightlife, and more. But tonight we see the intersection from the internet and the academic world. This guest is gay, and he's an ichnologist. Wait, what is that? His name is Fossil Daddy. He is a paleontologist and studies trace fossils, such as dinosaur footprints. He is known as the internet's paleontological father figure. These days, he spends time trying to bring the world of paleontology and geology, rock hounding, to queer spaces.
So I totally didn't take a tumble down this little slope. It might have hurt. But anyway, I found these really beautiful fern fossils right at the bottom. But even more impressive than that is that giant Calamite stem. These were plants that lived 300 million years ago in the Carboniferous period.
He is here to promote Fossil Daddy, which is his brand, which is available to you both on YouTube channel, other social media channels, and Patreon. And he wishes to get some Fossil Hunt sponsors too. So Fossil Daddy, welcome to Queer News Tonight.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
First off, I'm loving your Mass accent. It jumps right off of the page. Interesting. First, Fossil Daddy, when production told me that I was going to meet you and interview, my first question with the fossil was, were you making a joke and calling me old? But no, I found out that's not what was going on here. Fossil Daddy, clever brand name. Tell us why you got into this. This is, in all of the years of all of the people I've interviewed, I've never talked to somebody like you. Why did you get into it?
Get into paleontology or becoming the internet's paleontological father figure?
Let's start with paleontology, because the second one came after that.
Right. So actually, I got really interested in the study of paleontology with a little thing called Pokemon Red and Blue for the Game Boy back in 1998. So there's a section in Pokemon where you travel through Mount Moon and you battle a super nerd and essentially steal one of two fossils that he collected. Either the dome fossil or the helix fossil. And I chose the helix fossil, which I happen to have a bunch of real world examples of. Anyway, later on the game, you can revive the fossil, and helix fossil becomes the Pokemon Ammonite, which is based off of the very real world Ammonite group of fossils. And when I made that connection, it just kind of snowballed into a curiosity that later became an obsession that my parents were getting very annoyed about. And that never went away.
Excellent. And for many of our viewers, we'll translate what Fossil Daddy just said. We'll translate it as we go on in our broadcast. You got into this, and then it moved you into content creation. Now, this little thing called COVID-19 comes along, and we have a lot of time on our hands. And instead of constantly watching and worrying about what the latest RuPaul Drag Race episode and drama is, it created an opening for all kinds of new kinds of content creation. And along comes Fossil Daddy. Tell us how that all happened.
So, it really started in 2020 when I was bored at home, and I was just kind of scrolling through TikTok, but I never really made any videos. And at the time, I had a Instagram that had maybe like 2,000 followers, and I have since changed the name of that Instagram to Fossil Daddy because it had my actual name in it. So I posted, I think, my first video of me showing off a dinosaur footprint that I had just recently collected. And the internet was really quick to point out that I was wearing gray sweatpants. So, that was something that was totally unintentional. But it got me, I think, my first 10K on TikTok, and then that translated to like an influx of followers on Instagram too. Um, and like a lot of the older rock hounds that were following me at the time quickly unfollowed me because my content became more queer after that, like whatever works, right? So I started doing more of what worked, and that was paleontological thirst traps. So I probably lost maybe like a good half of my following back then. I went from like 2,000 followers to under 1,000, but quickly made up for it with the clout that I was getting on TikTok. So I just kind of ran with it, and then I changed the name to Fossil Daddy because like I noticed one comment I got pretty often was Daddy or Zaddy. So I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna change my name to make it a little more marketable, I'm gonna pick one of my favorite things, fossils, and then just attach the name Daddy to it. So I did that, and almost overnight I blew up on Instagram. So, honestly, one of the best unintentional decisions I ever made, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what's interesting for me, a pleasure in being able to speak to you the first time. Last week, I interviewed Andrew Christian, and the most famous underwear and swimwear designer in the entire world.
I
And
have some of his stuff.
do you? Okay. And Andrew and I talked extensively that his path to success was to, in a playful way, play with sexuality in the LGBTQ community. It's
Right.
not that the swimwear was overtly sexual or the underwear was overtly sexual, but the playfulness of it was. And that's
Exactly.
what I've just heard you say. Paleontology is not necessarily the sexiest topic on the planet, but you've been able to open it to people that would never pay attention to this because of the playful way you approach it.
Thank you. And like I think that's the best way for people to learn too. Like I've worked as a teacher before, and when you do things by textbook, like at least for me, my students very seldom really got anything out of it other than just being able to repeat the same things that have been said for over 150 years now. But when I started like including like Pokemon cards into like my curriculum and like tying it to the real world, that's when it started to click. And I kind of used that teaching method in my content creation too, only adding a little more like sex appeal to it, I guess. But yeah, like people learn better when they're able to connect, and the best way to connect is to be playful, maybe a little flirty, but also to like draw clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the
so
boundaries,
it's
I
work.
understand. You make a comment, which is what I was thinking about in my comment about what I heard Andrew Christian say. Now it makes perfect sense to me. Your background is a teacher, and you've combined many of these different lanes into a single intersection to make
Right.
this subject matter palatable and understandable. What is it that you want to accomplish as your stardom as Fossil Daddy continues to arise in these queer spaces? What is it you want to accomplish?
Well, so the rock hounding space, particularly, is pretty much dominated by older white men, heterosexual men, by the way. And it hasn't always been incredibly inclusive. In fact, most of the homophobia that I've experienced personally has been from the rock hounding and natural history space. Uh, so part is to make that space more inclusive and more diverse, and the only way you can do that is by appealing to outside groups and pulling them in. So I think that's what I'm doing. I mean, I have a Discord group of over 500 people from all different spectrums of the queer spectrum, just getting together for one common interest, and that's paleontology and science as a whole.
Hmm.
So it's queer people just haven't always felt very safe in these spaces, and I really want to create that safe space for them.
So in a way, Fossil Daddy and the branding of queer spaces for paleontology and academics and study is similar to the HRC or the National Task Force or GLAAD. It's providing visibility and advocacy for community in a different way. That's what your goal
Exactly.
is. Yeah, interesting.
Precisely.
I noticed your shirt, and of course, one of the great movie moments of my life, literally, was when they arrive on the island and he turns, and you watch his face when he sees the Brontosaurus for the first time, and then turns her head to see the plane in front with all of the dinosaurs. I love the film. I've done backstage events at both Orlando and Universal in a VIP program. For Jurassic Park, you're wearing the shirt. Is Fossil Daddy, I'm curious, Alan Grant, or is he Ian Malcolm, or is he John Hammond?
So I have a little bit of a confession. I only started getting into the Jurassic Park series again recently. I haven't actually seen any of the movies since 1994, and that's because when I went to the movie, yeah, when I went to the movie theater, I was so excited. I was like dinosaur crazy, and then the scene where Dilophosaurus appears and like
Yeah.
spits poison and the frills come out, I threw such a temper tantrum because Dilophosaurus was much bigger in reality. It was the apex predator of the early Jurassic. It had a beautiful head crest, but it did not have frills in real life, and it absolutely did not spit poison, and I could not like bring myself to accept that this was a work of fiction. So I threw a temper tantrum, and my mother like stormed out of there with all three of us. So I never saw a Jurassic Park film again after that. However, recently, I did see Jurassic World live, and I fell in love with it.
Okay.
And then from there, I watched Camp Cretaceous on Netflix, which is an
Right.
animated series.
Right.
And I loved it because, you know, they portrayed Baryonyx very accurately, which happens to be my favorite dinosaur. So I'm slowly getting back into the Jurassic Park and understanding why people love it. So I only just saw the movie for the first time again, maybe a month ago.
Yeah. Okay. And so to my question, are you Alan Grant? Are you Ian Malcolm? Are you John
I
Hammond?
don't. I'm trying to remember exactly who they are because that's how new I am to the
Oh,
franchise.
okay. And Alan Grant was the principal paleontologist, and Ian
Yes.
Malcolm was the mathematician, and John
Oh,
Hammond created Jurassic Park.
I'm definitely not a mathematician, so I'll go with Alan Grant.
Okay, very good. And you know what's funny to me? One of the reasons why for our production staff we're very excited to get you as a get for an interview at Queer News Tonight, because they're all gamers and they're really into these nerdy spaces. And we
Right.
constantly have, we play with this concept of especially gay men, but LGBT broadly, but especially gay men, of these nerdy spaces. And they constantly remind me, Al, you just have no idea what you're talking about. The nerd segment of our community is gigantic. And as you just told me this story, what I was thinking about is, dude, I'm talking about the films, and you're talking about the nerdy accuracy of the spitting dinosaur that was in the film. Isn't that the epitome of the nerdiness that your brand represents?
Yeah, I would think so, but just never get me in front of a Land Before Time film because I will tear it to shreds. Like, so, I mean, I love it, but I'll tear it to shreds.
Okay. Speaking of dinosaurs, you talk about that one. There was a lot of inconsistencies and inaccuracies in the movies, so maybe you don't want to go back and watch all of the films. I even know there's lots of things wrong with it. But your favorite dinosaur of all time in your paleontology academic experience, your favorite is what?
So I have a few. I've got Dilophosaurus, mainly because Dilophosaurus, well, one of the first fossil footprints I found is called a Eubrontes footprint. Now, the ichnogenus is Eubrontes, the species that made Eubrontes, is relatively unknown to science. However, it is widely accepted that Dilophosaurus was what created the Eubrontes footprints. So Eubrontes was the very first footprint that I found out in the field myself. So Dilophosaurus has a very special place in my heart for that, also because I threw a temper tantrum in 1994 over its depiction. So it just seems like cosmic justice for me to have that as a favorite. And then also Baryonyx, which is the Spinosaurid. I really love Baryonyx, British dinosaur, discovered in 1986. And then, you know, Argentinosaurus is probably another favorite because it's really underappreciated, I feel like. Protoceratops too.
Yeah.
Protoceratops is interesting because when they first found it, they thought it was fossil evidence of the mythical griffin.
Yeah. I'm curious, is it crossing anyone else's mind that Fossil Daddy's favorite dinosaur as a gay guy is the spitting dinosaur? Is anyone else making that joke in their head? We'll move quickly beyond that. I'm curious in terms of the shirt that you have on and what you've said in terms of how you followed Jurassic Park, but the conceptual idea that we could bring dinosaurs back and we could have a theme park like Jurassic Park. Do you think that that's a good idea?
I think it would be a fun idea, but I think the question is, would it be an ethical idea? And I'm all for bioethics. Like, I believe that animals should not be the subject of experimentation for human gain. And I feel that way about prehistoric animals too, because at the end of the day, these were living things, and I think people tend to forget that. We think of them as like these mythical, long gone beasts, but they were very animalistic. And if we were to bring them back, you could probably bet I'd be advocating for their welfare as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't think it would be a good idea?
I think if we were to do that, that they would just be the epitome of animal exploitation, and I would be against that.
Yeah. And Fossil Daddy, I'm curious in terms of how the gay community embraces you. I heard your reference the paleontologist thirst trap in your social media. However you attract attention, the Andrew Christian model, I cheer for that. You are bringing education and a stream of study to the gay community, LGBTQ community that might not necessarily pay attention, and you help to bring that attention. But when you're out and about, you're no longer behind the camera, and you're no longer. I was going to make the joke in your mom's basement. I know you're not, but this nerdy kind of approach that you do when you're out and about interacting with other gay men, and they learn about what you do and who you are and what you're interested in. How do they react to you?
They react to me with a little bit of skepticism, to be honest. Especially if they don't know my online personality, they're just like, really? Like, that's what you do? And then I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'll have to like bring up my photos and show them exactly like what it is that I do. And they're like, oh, okay, you really do that. Do that. I thought you were just talking shit,
Right.
But yeah, so like people are like gay men in particular are usually meet me with skepticism because they just haven't really met anybody in the field, because it is a very predominantly straight white field.
Yeah, older white men.
Yes.
The John Hammond kind of personality is who they are. Are there any others like you in America?
Yeah. Actually, so I do have a friend named Pete who did work at the American Natural History Museum. He's, a queer, we call ourselves Gay-Laeontologists. And then there's also
Gay-Laeontologist is what you call
Gay-Laeontologist.
yourself.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what we call it. Then there's also Francis. Forgive me, I forget his last name, but he's a Spanish YouTuber and also a paleontologist, and he's also kind of like the Spanish version of Fossil Daddy, but he goes by his first and last name. Good friend of mine. I can't pronounce his last name because speech impediment, Boston accent, Spanish, all those three things just do not mix. And then. Yeah, there are very few of us, really. I can only name three.
And I'm curious. I'm curious. An excellent opportunity for me to ask Fossil Daddy and how charming you are, not only in field but in personality. Why is the gay community not more centric in this field? I mean, if it was a Broadway show about dinosaurs, there would be 300 of us producing in New York. Why isn't there?
I think because we didn't have a Judy Garland in our field bringing queers in. So, it's true, though. It has not been a very historically safe space for us. As I mentioned, I've experienced a lot of homophobia and transphobia within the rock hounding space. Especially the latter. It seems to be a really tough place for trans people, and I want to change that.
Yeah.
So, I can remember one instance where I'm not going to name the group because, this was a few years ago, and I don't want anyone being attacked. But anyway, I was a member of a local rock group. There are dozens of them, by the way. And I was in charge of facilitating field trips to local quarries and outcrops, stuff like that. Well, anyway, when I started to blow up on TikTok as Fossil Daddy, they decided to underhandedly ban me from the Facebook group, but also like kind of still use me to facilitate the field trips because I was good at it. And they did that. They held like a vote, and the vote was to kick me out because I was too gay or because I was too open about it, and it made them uncomfortable. And I only found out that way when a friend of mine had texted me. It was like, hey, just so you know, they're banning you from the Facebook group, and they plan on pretending that the group doesn't exist. Just think you should be aware they're being homophobic assholes. So that happened. And then, when I do get a homophobic comment on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, it usually does come from someone within the rock hounding space who is going through the paleontology hashtags and didn't like seeing me there.
Yeah, it's a backhanded rejection and backhanded homophobia. It's quite interesting. Well, I encourage everyone, a Gay-Laeontologist. I love that phrase, Fossil Daddy. The highest compliment. I'm sorry, you should what?
Put it on a shirt.
Yeah, on a shirt. A Gay-Laeontologist. You absolutely should. The high compliment praise that I can give to the brand and encourage people to look is obviously Fossil Daddy is attracting in terms of this paleontologist thirst trapping kind of thing. But that only lasts for about 2 minutes. You're only going to pay attention to that for 2 minutes. And then you stay because it's academically and conversationally interesting. So,
and stimulating.
Yes, and stimulating. So you should for sure reach out. Tell us in terms of helping how people find you and how people support you. Tell us that again.
So people have been finding me a lot just through the Huffington Post article that was published about me. And then from there, the New York Post and then the New Yorker also did their own versions of the same story without reaching out to me. The Daily Mail, too, of all places. And I think people find me generally through my content. Like my Instagram reels seem to do good, and that's where I seem to draw the most new people in. People are just starting to find my YouTube channel because I just added one a few months ago, and that's starting to kind of pick up traction a little bit. So I think it's because I have myself spread all over the internet that people are just kind of finding me that way.
Yes. Joke of spread all over the internet, intentional, I'm sure.
Yes.
Make sure that you check out Fossil Daddy's social media. I love this story, to be honest with you, because I think one of the most valuable advocacy things that we can do to overcome homophobia in America in all of its various forms is to show that the LGBTQ community is not any one thing. And
we're a diverse group.
Yeah, exactly. A very diverse community, and it helps to fight homophobic thinking, and it helps to support the idea that you should give the queer community opportunities to meet and learn, and we're interested in all kinds of things. Fossil Daddy, a pleasure meeting you. I encourage everybody to follow you. It's quite interesting, and we cheer and congratulate the success of what you're having.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you too. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.